Sports City, chefs, Sports City, chefs. Yeah. Taj.
Welcome to another Sports City Chefs edition of Fingers Foods. And this Finger Foods, we are going to cover the 2023 National Champion LSU Tiger baseball team. Talk about a little bit of the history of the program as well, and some cool things that they had happen this year that have never happened in the history of college baseball. So we're going to cover several things real quick. Shout out to our sponsors, PHI Apparel. That's phiapparel.co. Use the promo code CHEFS at checkout. Get yourself 15% off. Also, don't forget our shows during the week. Through Blog Talk, you can check us out. SportsCityChefs.com is a website where you can check everything out. Our shows are at 9 p.m. Eastern Time throughout the week. Tuesday nights football, Wednesday nights Callers Cookout, Thursday nights Roundtable Gumbo. And then the mothership of all, the timeless Sunday morning brunch, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with the head honcho TP Timeless. And I have the pleasure and the privilege of being alongside as his co-host on Sunday mornings, where we recap what's happened over the weekend and we set the table for you for anything going on in sports on that Sunday and in the upcoming week ahead. So join Timeless and I on Sunday mornings as well for the Timeless Sunday morning brunch. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about this 2023 LSU Tigers baseball team real quick. So they had the consensus, one of the best players in the country, talked about being the number one pick overall in the draft coming into the season, and a man named Dylan Cruz, who did not disappoint as a senior, hit .426 with like a .568 on base percentage. They had him coming back. They had a 6'6" right-hander who was hitting 95 consistently on the gun from Air Force, who transferred over, working with the pitching coach at LSU, Wesley Johnson, who's now the head coach at Georgia. He added some miles on his fastball. He topped out at 102 this year, but Paul Skeens averaged 98.2 miles an hour on his fastball this season. And in his first game in the College World Series, which was their opening game against Tennessee, Paul Skeens threw 46 of his 115 pitches at 100 miles an hour or more. So legit ace-type stuff. So going into this season, LSU had a lot of talent on the mound, but they suffered a ton of injuries. So it was, like back in the old Braves days where they used to say spawn and sane and pray for rain. It was schemes and pray, pretty much. So Paul Skeens was the ace of the staff. The question was, could LSU win enough without him on the mound? So going into the NCAA regional, LSU and Wake Forest were the only two teams that were ranked number one all year. Going into that, to the NCAAs, LSU kind of hit skids. They lost 2 out of 3 to Mississippi State, blew a big lead in the second game and lost the third one. Lost 2 out of 3 to Auburn, and then went 1-2 in the SEC tournament the last weekend. So they kind of limped home down the stretch, and the question was, can LSU get enough from their pitching staff without Paul Skeens to win? And most people said no, so the bracket would have to fall right. So going into the NCAA tournament, the LSU Tigers win 3 games in the opening weekend to advance out of the first round, the regional round. They did not lose a game, so they didn't have to go 4 or 5 games deep on that weekend. They were able to get it done in 3 games. The following weekend was super regional weekend. They played Kentucky from the SEC, who they had a really good 3-game series with earlier in the season, but they took care of them in 2 games. So once again, LSU doesn't have to go deep in their pitching. They go to Omaha. They win the first game against Tennessee with Paul Skeens on the mound. Then they play Wake Forest in the battle of the only 2 teams that were ranked number one all year, and LSU dropped a really close game there. So they've already used their best pitcher. They got 1 loss. What are they going to do? They come back. They bring in a left-hander, Nate Ackenhausen, who's coming back to LSU next year. Had only pitched 25 innings all year. Gives them 6 innings of scoreless baseball with 7 strikeouts against Tennessee. And then they piece together and win that game. They come back against Wake Forest. They have to beat them twice. They win the first game against Wake Forest to force a second game, and then Paul Skeens is able to come back for the second game. So LSU, after losing on Monday, had to come back Tuesday and play Tennessee. Wednesday beat Wake Forest, forced the second game against Wake Forest on Thursday. LSU had to play every single night of that week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Schemes came back and won the Wake Forest game, the second game of that, to knock them out and help LSU advance to the National Championship Series against Florida. Now, Florida had everything set up. They played on the first day on Friday. They won. They played again on Sunday, and they won. And with the way that first bracket goes, you are then able to not have to come back again until Wednesday. So you could come back with your number one starter, and then they won their game on Wednesday. So LSU had to play 5 games to get through. Florida only had to play 3. They play Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, and then come back for the championship series starting Saturday. So they got 3 days in between their second and third games. And then 3 more days in between their third game and the championship series. So they were well rested, ready to go, had their pitching set up. I thought LSU would be in trouble, but LSU was able to make it through that entire series without Paul schemes at all. Ty Floyd started the first game and tied a World Series record for 17 strikeouts in a start in the College World Series. And they were able to win the first game against Florida. They got absolutely blasted in Game 2. They lost 24-4. In a game in which their shortstop, Jordan Thompson, who'd been their shortstop for 3 years, made a couple of errors, struck out a couple times at the plate. And going into Monday night's decisive Game 3, the question was, can Paul Skeens pitch? He did not, but it turned out he did not need to. The LSU Tigers come out in Game 3, and they jumped up big early. Jordan Thompson, the shortstop I just told you about, had been 1 for 30 in the College World Series. He got 2 big RBI hits in that game. LSU jumped up on Florida early on. Florida took a 2-0 lead in the first inning, and then LSU jumped up on them big and ran away with an 18-4 was the final in that game, and LSU broke a record for most hits by a team and most runs in a championship game. So the last 2 games were anticlimactic. The game that was probably the best game of the College World Series was that elimination game, the Thursday night game against Wake Forest, when both teams had 1 loss. LSU won it on a home run late. But looking at that game, there was another play in the 9th inning where the guy tried to do a squeeze bunt, a bunt down the line. The first baseman ran a long way to get to the ball, flipped it home, and got the runner out. If they do not make that play, LSU goes home and Wake Forest advances to play Florida. So that was a huge defensive play from Trey Morgan, another Louisiana guy. So I'm just going to say a lot of these guys' names, but just to kind of recap some of the talent on this roster. 14 of them were drafted this past season. So that's like half the roster got drafted into the Major League Draft. But LSU, for the first time in the history of college baseball, they are the first team to have the top 2 picks in the draft chosen. Paul Skeens went to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Dylan Cruz goes to the Washington Nationals. And I think the Pirates made the right move in taking Skeens. There's a possibility that he can be an ace. So you take the ace, and so that's what they're doing. So Paul Skeens is future lies with Pittsburgh, and then Dylan Cruz joins a plethora of young, talented prospects in the Washington Nationals organization. Let's see. Wyatt Langford, the kid from Florida, went 4th in the draft as well. So 3 of the top 4 picks of the draft were in the championship series. There was also a kid from Wake Forest drafted in the top 10. He's the guy that started opposite Skeens in the Thursday night game. lots of talent in college baseball this year. But just to kind of say some of these guys' names and give them some recognition, you had Skeens and Cruz. Then you also had Trey Morgan, a Louisiana product who was drafted in the 3rd round by Tampa. You had some local Louisiana boys too, and Gavin Dugas and Cade Beloso, both New Orleans guys, hit big home runs in this game. Also, Josh Pearson with his athletic ability in left field. They had 3 different catchers that showed up big this year. And then Tommy Tanks, a kid from North Carolina State, transferred in, wanted to play third base, and did. And so he will be back next year as well. So those are some of the guys I mentioned. Ty Floyd, Thatcher Hurd, who transferred from UCLA, really helped that pitching staff, and Riley Cooper, who came over with Coach Jay Johnson from Arizona, were all big pieces of this team as well. So I wanted to get their names mentioned. I got about a minute and a half, so I'm going to try to lay this out real quick. This is the 7th time that LSU has been to the mountaintop and been national champions of college baseball. 2nd most amongst all programs, only behind USC. But LSU has had all 7 of these championships in the last 32 years. USC only has 1 in my lifetime. So you tell me which one's the most dominant baseball program. I will wait. LSU started with Skip Berkman through the 80s, came from Miami, built that LSU program up with names like Albert Bell and Ben McDonald. They won 5 championships in 10 years from 1991 to 2000. Then they came back and won their 6th one in 2009. And now you got championship number 7. Now in 2023, Jay Johnson's not stopping anytime soon. The LSU Tigers are national champions. They'll be competitive again next year. We will see what happens. But on the Bayou, they always say, laissez les bon temps rouler. Peace, chefs.
Sports City, chefs, Sports City, chefs, yeah. Cabby, Taj.